in seniority. Let's start with you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Let me start off by indicating that the amendment that I have is on H.R. 5585. And let me thank the Rules Committee for your courtesies throughout the year for listening to the concerns of members to make legislation better. And that is the intent that we have today, is to make legislation better and to, in fact, realize that with all the discussions that I heard as I was listening here, we would do well to have collaborative work, just as they're doing in the United States Senate, to produce a bill that should draw the support of all of us who are supportive of Americans. I wanted to bring up the title of a bill filed I'll do that as I filed, that was the Save America Comprehensive Immigration Bill, filed in 2007. I filed it and have been filing this bill repeatedly. And the concept that I want to focus on, Mr. Chairman, is that it mentions comprehensive. And that is what we have in these series of bills. It is not a comprehensive approach. It is piece by piece. And you will see us try to make amends for things that we have agreed to as Republicans and Democrats. But I want to go back to what I wanted to start with, which is to offer my deepest sympathy, again, to the family of Border Patrol agent Raul Gonzalez, a Texan, for his loss, the loss of his life in the line of duty. I want to clearly make that known to all of us, that we mourn for his passing and we recognize the service of all of them. But as we go back to trying to make a difference in this country, we would make a difference by doing it comprehensively and listening to people who, one, are in states on the border who have a different and real perspective and also have been engaged in this process for a long time. So Chairman Cole, Ranking Member McGovern, and members of the committee, thank you again for this opportunity to speak in support of my amendment to H.R. 5585. My amendment would make three changes. First, my amendment makes a technical change to mirror language that appears in existing federal criminal statutes. I'm not reinventing the wheel, which prohibits the commission of various offenses such as assault, murder, and manslaughter perpetrated against officers and employees of the United States and foreign officials while engaged in the performance of their official duties. As currently written, H.R. 5585 would require that the government prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the pursuing Border Patrol agent had the legal authority to engage in the underlying pursuit. In other words, the fact finder would have to determine whether the agent was abiding by laws and regulations in effect at the time of the pursuit. I want to make it better and indicate simply that it was in the performance of his or her official duties. In other words, we wouldn't have that extra burden. My amendment would simply require that the government prove that the Border Patrol agent was within their duties, meaning within the scope of the agent's employment. Second, my amendment would eliminate the minimum mandatory penalties in the bill, which, while maintaining the maximum penalties. Let me make it very clear, Republicans and Democrats over the years have supported the removing of mandatory minimums. We have had a whole contingent of evangelicals who stood alongside of us and said that mandatory minimums did not fit the four corners of the law or the penalties that should be rendered. Like many of my colleagues, I have opposed mandatory minimum penalties, particularly because of the devastating impact these sentencing schemes have inflicted on many Americans, including those who are communities of color. But I think the singular point to know is that it has been people from both parties over the years. And why are we separating now? Mandatory minimum sentences contributed to the mass incarceration of generations of Americans and are the primary reason that the United States has the highest incarceration rate in the world. Mandatory minimums have been studied extensively and been found to distort rational sentencing systems, discriminate against minorities, waste billions of taxpayer dollars, and quite often violate common sense while failing to reduce crime. Brain trusts, like the Rand Commission, have concluded that mandatory minimum sentences are less effective than discretionary sentencing and far more costly. And so support comes from the Families Against Mandatory Minimums, supported also by evangelicals, the American Bar Association, the Judicial Conference of the United States, and many other organizations. And the Judicial Conference of the United States has reiterated to this body its opposition to mandatory minimum sentencing schemes more than a dozen times, noting these types of penalties severely distort and damage federal sentencing, undermine the U.S. sentencing guidelines mandated by this very Congress to promote fairness and proportionality in federal sentencing and destroy equity and honesty in sentencing, and encouraging coercive charging practices. Finally, my amendment would add an additional data point to the annual report: the immigration status of individuals charged with an offense under the new code section. In the end, the changes proposed in my amendment are narrowly tailored to address glaring deficiencies and do not change the overall mission of this bill. This is when we work together. My amendment considers the many criticisms of mandatory minimum penalties while allowing a judge's discretion to impose informed sentencing to satisfy the purposes and goals of federal sentencing. So I thank the committee again for the opportunity to testify, but more importantly, to present, I think, very instructive changes to this legislation, and changes that have been expressed by Republicans and Democrats over the years in the criminal justice system. And I remind us collectively on the bills that we have before us that we are, in many instances, denying due process. And I don't know if we want to pass bills out of the United States Congress that denies due process, even in the immigration footprint. So let me thank you, and I yield back. Thank you.